Welcome, everyone. I'm Katie Freeman, and welcome to Mystery Writers of America's annual symposiums. Tonight's discussion is with the nominees for the Lilian Braun Memorial Award, and our moderator tonight is Neil Plakcy, and I'll be introducing him in a minute. You can learn more about the Mystery Writers of America and the Edgar Awards by following us on social media using the hashtag Edgars 2024, and by visiting the websites mysterywriters.org and edgarawards.com. A reminder that the Edgar Awards will be live streamed on our YouTube channel on May 1st, which you may be where you're watching this now as well. And during tonight's discussion, I will be posting links to our panelists' books in the chat. Our featured bookstore today is Once Upon a Crime in Minneapolis. Please feel free and extremely welcome to submit questions in the Q&A box throughout the conversation, and we'll get to them towards the end of the hour. And now to introduce our moderator. Neil Plakcy is the author of the award-winning Golden Retriever mystery series, as well as over 50 other titles in mystery, romance, and adventure. And I heard that one of his mysteries, Dog of Thieves, recently won Best Novel from the Dog Writers Association of America. So congratulations, Neil, and looking forward to this conversation. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you very much. So let's jump right in with my first question, which is for Mark. And tell me how you say your last name.
Sure, it's Waddell.
Waddell. Okay. Yeah. So your book is one of only 2 books out of 90 submitted for the award, which featured a male protagonist. Any thoughts?
I'm surprised there was another one.
Second one?
Yeah. I love cozy mysteries. I have been watching and consuming mysteries since I was a little kid. And yeah, I mean, that sort of prototype of Jessica Fletcher is sort of burned into my soul as the sort of archetypal cozy sleuth. But when I tried my hand at this, I thought, I want to write from a perspective that is genuine. I certainly didn't want to put myself in the shoes of a female sleuth, and so I thought I would write what I knew, which was the experience of a queer male Canadian. And I wonder how many books you read this year had Canadian sleuths in them.
But that's a great question. I think there were at least a few.
Oh, wow. That's even more surprising.
Can't think of her name right off the top of my head, but she is a very prolific Canadian author of mysteries.
Louise Penny?
Pardon? No.
Louise Penny. Oh, okay.
I'm thinking of a Western Canadian, and she writes under several different pseudonyms. So we had 3 of her, just of her alone.
Canadian. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, great representation. All right.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of representation, moving on to Patricia Johns, you have an extensive publishing record, but this is your first mystery set in Amish country. What drew you there?
Well, I write Amish romances, so I was already in that setting in my head. And I really thought that Amish settings would be great for cozy mysteries because you have a really secluded little community. They're isolated off. If somebody were to die, your suspects are quite limited. So I loved that idea of, a lot of times with cozy mysteries, we have to sort of figure out a way to, how are we going to make it a small group of suspects to deal with? And I thought it was just a great idea to use an Amish community for that. If these people live in this Amish community and somebody dies, somebody killed that person and had good reason to. Very shocking stuff. So I thought it would just be a lot of fun to write.
And I also loved it because you brought your sleuth in very realistically, in that she's helping the English detective, English being what the Amish call non-Amish, helping him learn about the community. Because so many cozy mysteries in particular the author really has to work to get, the candle shop owner or the cookie maker investigating the crime.
Yeah.
No shade on candle mysteries or cookie mysteries. There's a lot of wonderful ones. Jennifer, we're talking about representation, I guess, here tonight. Hot Pot Murder is one of two finalists which explored Asian culture. Why is this subgenre gaining in popularity? Any ideas?
Well, I'm hoping it's because it's a reflection of the world around us. And I mean, really, when I grew up, I didn't really see anything that had Asian mystery. So I'm glad that I'm able to write in this space. And I'm hoping that the next generation will also love cozy mysteries and also appreciate, being represented and feeling like they are actually in the story as the main character and protagonist.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things that Mystery Writers of America is doing is trying to bring in younger readers and bring in authors of color, authors of diverse backgrounds, which brings us to Danielle. Yours was, again, one of the few books that had an African-American sleuth and a really non-traditional sleuth in the sense of the standard stereotype of a cozy, for example, young woman who's had something go wrong in her life, has inherited her great aunt's bakery and moved back to her hometown. Your sleuth is very different. You tell us a little bit about Glory and how you came to write her.
Glory Broussard is a woman of a certain age, as I like to put it. She's a Black woman who lives in Lafayette, Louisiana. And, she has, I think, some things that are probably, she's older. She's heavy set. She has some physical, limitations because she's an older woman. I myself have always been fascinated and have enjoyed talking to older women. I think older women, particularly older Black women, are often minimized and overlooked in our society. And the more I thought about it, I thought, well, you know what, those also happen to be really great attributes for a sleuth. So that's how I landed on Glory.
Great. It's true that the people that we overlook in society are often the ones who have that outside view and can really make good sleuths. Did any of you particularly want to read a moment or two or a bit from your book?
Sure, I'll start since
Okay.
we're on Glory, and then I'm sure others will jump in. So another attribute of Glory is that she has a lot of problems in her life. And one of her problems is that her mother has died and she is going through some grief. And for Glory, this grief has manifested itself as that she has a borderline hoarding problem. And so her daughter comes from New York City for the funeral of the person who has died. And there is a letter on the door basically saying that the house is about to be condemned. And this is where we arrive at the beginning of this short scene. Delphine pushed the storm door open and unlocked the front door. The scent of mothballs was so overwhelming that Delphine couldn't help but to twist her face. Then there was the stacks of newspapers that lined the entryway, the stacks of cookbooks with stained covers and oily pages piled on what looked like a sofa. Across from a large TV that was always on sat a hutch that was overflowing with crystal punch bowls, cake stands, and a silver tea service, which was laughable, as there were definitely no tea parties or social gatherings hosted in this house. In the corner was a stack of mismatched chintz plates that tinkled with every step she took. A pile of shopping bags stuffed full of clothing with tags still attached took up the corner behind a tattered plaid armchair. Glory had followed behind her, reading and rereading the letter from the city. What does this even mean? It doesn't make any kind of sense. I'll tell you what it means. It means they think you're going to get suffocated by a stack of Good Housekeeping magazines from 1986 or impaled by an imitation silver teapot. You take that back, Glory fumed. That is real sterling silver. I knew I should have come down here more often, especially after grandmother died, Delphine said, gripping her forehead with the palm of her hand. I always knew you were not the tidiest person, but now that we've veered into full-blown hoarding territory, when did this happen? Hoarder? I'm no hoarder, Glory said, her face buckling as if she had just swallowed something bitter. Oh, I see. You want to diagnose me because you saw this in some reality show. Those people are disgusting. I am not a hoarder. I am a collector. Delphine was unmoved. Tell that to the city of Lafayette when they condemn your house and board your windows with plywood, she said, searching for a place to sit. Finding nowhere other than her mother's tattered chair and a sofa scattered with Easter decoration in the dog days of August, she stomped into the kitchen. She placed her leather purse on the laminate countertop and started typing with her cell phone. What are you doing? Demanded Glory. I'm emailing my paralegal to get a court date for my mother, who is sick in the head and can't stop shopping at estate sales and needs a firm hand to restore order in her home. You are doing no such thing, Glory said, sinking into her armchair and hoisting her feet into an equally worn ottoman. I'll deal with the city myself. I just wonder why I got this letter. What exactly are they doing? Sending folks to peep in my windows. Going through my trash? I'm going to ask Bo Landry how that works. Stop, said Delphine, exasperated. Do you realize how serious this is? They're trying to condemn your house. Are you not at all concerned? Yes, Delphine, I am. My mind just operates different than yours. First, I need to know who's responsible for this so I can plot out my revenge. And second, she said, looking around the cluttered house, I suppose my collections have gotten a little unwieldy. Maybe I can file an extension or appeal, something to buy us time, Delphine said. Regardless, tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., we start cleaning up this mess.
Thank you very much. Again, going backwards, Jennifer, did you have something you wanted to read with us? Or do you want to just pass?
Sure. I was just going to read the opening paragraph, nothing long.
Okay.
So from Hot Pot Murder, in my LA Mystery, Night Market Mysteries, I like to kind of twist a line from a classic book, so you probably recognize it when I read it. All happy hot pot gatherings are alike. Each unhappy hot pot event is disastrous in its own way. It started off early with the invitation from Nicola Ho, continuing his trend of irritating me ever since we were middle school academic rivals. Nick had now single-handedly ruined my plans for a quiet Thanksgiving dinner with my nearest and dearest beside me. The holiday was one of the few times that Ba actually shut down his dim sum restaurant, Wing Fat, and focused on family. So basically, her quiet Thanksgiving dinner is now extended into a larger local Asian American Restaurant Association hot pot dinner. And it's a closed circle mystery because one of the diners dies. And then the protagonist, Yale, and her cousin Celine have to figure out what happened.
Okay. And a delightful book it is. So thank you. How about Patricia? Do you have something you'd like to read for us?
Sure, I do. I thought I would read When They Find the Body. Hello, she called, and she headed towards the door, her boots crunching over the snow. Just as she reached it, the door banged open and Petunia took a startled step back. It wasn't Ike in the doorway, but Eden, and her face was pasty white, her coat open in the front and a strange crimson streak down the front of her purple dress. Her hands were trembling and they had red on them too. Blood? The details were only now starting to come together in Petunia's mind, and her heart hammered hard to catch up. Eden, are you hurt? Petunia gasped. He's dead, Eden whispered hoarsely. Petunia, he's dead. Petunia pushed past her friend into the ice house. A lantern sat on a shelf, illuminating the small room in a golden glow. Stacks of ice blocks loomed up in a wall, each layer of ice separated from the ice below by insulating wood shavings that also covered the floor. Lying on his back in a pool of crimson, his eyes wide and an ice pick sticking out of his chest, was Ike Smoker. Ike, Petunia said quietly, almost afraid that he'd answer. His eyes were glazed over and a patch of blood seeped out of his woolen coat, hard to make out against the black wool, but it glistened oddly in the kerosene lamplight. She leaned over him, her heart thundering in her chest. There was no life left in him, but as she leaned down to touch his neck all the same, he was as cold as the ice around him. Petunia scanned the small room in the front of the long ice house. The front of the building was the only place where there was any space to move around, and the floor was covered in a layer of shaved wood that had been scuffed by boot marks. Yeah, he's dead, Petunia said, more to fill the silence than anything else. And when she looked up, she found her father first and the tourists behind him, peering in the doorway with stricken looks on their faces.
Great, thank you very much. And Mark, do you have something to read?
Sure, yeah. So this is similar to what we just heard. This is after the body has been discovered, and a certain handsome Mountie makes an appearance. So I'd called 911 as soon as I realized that Joel wasn't moving, and in fact would never move again. Something I'd ascertained after one look at the blood matting his pale hair and the grayish pallor of the hands flung limply to either side. Not to mention that he apparently no longer needed to breathe. There was a dead body in my aunt's garden. Noting with distant relief the arrival of two vehicles on the other side of the picket fence, I returned my attention to Joel's pathetic, crumpled form. I couldn't stop staring at the ominous stain that discolored the back of his head. My morbid fascination was so profound, in fact, that it took me a while to realize that someone was speaking to me. Giving my head a brisk shake, I turned and found a tall, imposing figure standing at my side, wearing a blue tactical vest with police emblazoned in white letters across the front. The rugged, handsome face watching me below the peaked cap was utterly expressionless. "There's a dead body," I blurted, pointing to the pond. "Yes, we're aware," the officer said in a dry tone. He was what my aunt might have described as a strapping specimen of a man, several inches taller than me, with broad shoulders under his tactical vest and a pair of flinty hazel eyes that watched me with seeming dispassion. From his uniform, I figured he was a Mountie, which made sense, as Crescent Cove was too small to have its own dedicated force. "I'm Sergeant Monroe," he went on, after a slight pause. "And you're Luke Tremblay." "Right, yeah." "You called this in?" Yeah, I found him right before I called 911. There was another pause. I saw him take out a small notebook and a pen from his tactical vest. "Have you ever seen him before?" he asked as he flipped open the notepad. He really was good looking, I noticed distractedly. Maybe it was just the uniform. No, I decided a moment later, it definitely wasn't just the uniform. His square jaw had a dusting of dark stubble, and his voice was deep and warm and actually a little thrilling. "Sir," I tried to stop mooning over the nice policeman and gather my thoughts. Yes, had I seen him before? Yes. He came here yesterday. He said his name was Joel Mackenzie.
Okay, thank you all. It's really interesting the way your voices come back to me, having read all of these books. So this award was funded by and named for Lilian Jackson Braun, who wrote traditional mysteries, in my opinion, with a cozy flair. But the term cozy has really been become a marketing term for a very particular kind of traditional mystery. How do you feel about that? And do you feel like your book really fits in that genre? And anybody who wants to answer can feel free. Or shall I call on you?
I can answer first.
Okay.
Mine are definitely cozy. So when I think of a cozy, I think of a community. And that's how I feel like my books are, welcoming you into a community. So it's the main character, but it's also like all the side characters in the town or the night market, say. And I personally, I don't have a problem with identifying my books, I think, as cozy mysteries, because I think that my books do help people to escape and help people to have hope and really believe in this idea that, justice will be served, and that you can be like the amateur sleuth, right? You can have that bravery and the courage and just the ability to like do things, great things in your life.
Right. Anyone else want to chime in?
I'll just, oh, sorry. No, you can go ahead, Patricia.
I'll just be really quick then. I was going to say that the teaspoon of blood idea, where the murder is shocking, but it's not grisly. We see enough to be like, ooh, that's a dead person, but we don't get into the really grisly, horrific parts, and it's more about the puzzle than it is about the true horror of a murder. That's something that I enjoy in cozy mysteries, and I think makes a really good cozy when we can take a deep breath, get over the horror very quickly, and get straight to the puzzle.
And Mark?
Yeah, similar to what Jennifer was saying, I began writing this, or I wrote this in late 2021, and the world was not a great place. Not that it still is now, but we were coming out of a pandemic, and I wanted to write something that was set in a small community that felt safe and that could be that sort of escape. I wanted, as I was writing it, to exist in a world where there weren't pandemics or politics or a climate crisis or anything else, and just a couple of wholesome murders, just a couple of people dying mysteriously, and a couple of brave sleuths trying to figure it out. That I find that very comforting, and I think lots of other people do. And that, yeah, I really embrace that writing this.
Great. So let's talk about titles for a minute. I think one of the best covers that I saw was Danielle's, because they did such a great job of the bee motif. And Glory Broussard is Glory Bee. It is also a thing that African-American women would say. So where did that title come from? Did you have that title when you started? And then I want to ask us a more general question about where you get your titles from.
Yeah.
Danielle?
Candidly, no, I did not have a title when I started writing this book, and I was nearly done with it. And if you want to know the truth, I had a birthday drink celebration, and I was telling a bunch of friends, and over several bottles of wine and a festive night, one of my friends said, "You should name it Glory B, because her name is Glory Broussard, and it sounds introductory, and he's like, I think that would be, and then you could have other titles that play off of Glory idioms, which is exactly what I'm going to do." So shout out to Michael McCormick. That was not me at all. That was a friend, a very clever friend of mine. And I was heavily involved in the cover design. Thank you so much. I had a lot of ideas and I think that the designer did I felt very heard and very listened in the development of the cover. I love a clue cover. I love a cover that when you read it and then you go back and you think, I see what they did. I see how this all comes together. I see what they were communicating, but not really communicating unless you read the book. I specifically wanted that kind of cover, and just so pleased with what was done.
And a bee sting is part of this book too.
Yeah, and that was the big thing. It was like the bees are very important, and we're not giving anything away, but the bees are an important part of the plot. And so, you'll see bees and honeycombs incorporated throughout the artwork of the book, even in the interior pages. So happy with it.
Now, the rest of you don't really have the kind of punny titles. Cheddar Late Then Dead, for example, was one of the cheese mysteries that we read. Did you any of you consider those kind of punny titles? I mean, The Body in the Back Garden, The Death of an Amish Bridegroom, and Hot Pot Murder are pretty, I don't want to say they're pretty straightforward, let's say. They don't really give you a clue that this is going to be a cozy or a funny or, that kind of book. Did any of you consider other titles? Guess not. That's okay.
I am not great with puns personally. And I had a title for this originally, and my agent said it's too high concept, whatever that meant. So I had to change it to this, and yeah. So
yeah, I'm like Danielle, that my books, my golden retriever mysteries, all have they're all around a theme. They're all puns on God phrases. So in dog we trust, for example. So I like puns. I've gotten some comments from readers who don't. Now, so many of the books that we read this year revolved around food. So, Jennifer, yours food is right there in the cover, or right there in the title. Why do you think food is important in these? And then the rest of you chime in as you wish.
Both. And I mean, I couldn't find a pun for hot pot. So I like puns, but so there's a lot of food. You can see there's like the hot pot meal in it. And so, I mean, mine is definitely in the culinary cozy subgenre. So it's got a lot of food going for it. It's at a night market, which has food. The two cousins are foodie cousins. The dad of Yale owns a dim sum restaurant. Yale herself will often categorize people by her like dim sum personality chart. There's a recipes in the back, so it's all about food. And I mean, yes, part of it is I like food myself, so which is great for research purposes. But also, I think it's a way to bring in some of the culture, a way to bring in some of the family dynamics, and I don't know. I just really like having that theme, and it goes well with a lot of my own background, where we actually own a family restaurant, so that was helpful to inform the story creation process.
That's great. Anyone else have food in particular in their books?
You can't write a book about Louisiana and not have food. In fact, I would say the criticism that I got was that there wasn't enough food.
Well,
I have sorry.
No, go on. I was just going to throw it.
I have a heroine who's a terrible cook, and she's supposed to be a good cook. She's an Amish woman. That's what Amish women do, and she's absolutely horrible at cooking. So I sort of turned it on its head, where other people make delicious food, and she is just it's hit or miss, and most often it's missed for her cooking. So I just took it the other direction.
And Mark, is there a cafe in your book where people congregate?
yeah, there are a few. I myself write in a coffee shop. That's my office for writing. I like to be around people, but not have to talk to them. And so yeah, and that culture does permeate this book, certainly. Yes. And again, because it's set in a small town, I wanted to kind of highlight the fact that people are gathering together in these places, usually around food, right? Or coffee or something like that.
Or in the case of Canadians, maple syrup.
That's true. And curling. Yes.
Yes. So here's just a general kind of, well, actually, sticking with the title question for a moment. I did some statistical review of the 90 titles that we had. And so 4 of them had the word dead, 2 deadly, 7 death, 4 fatal, and 18 murder. So do you think that a mystery has to have a murder, first of all? I mean, I think there have been some classic examples of, a book around a kidnapping or blackmail or so on. But I honestly, I grew up thinking of this genre as murder mysteries. That's what I called them before I, heard about things like crime fiction. So, to you,
It's
what
a
do you
good
think about that?
because I'm contemplating a third, and I'm like, how many dead bodies can truly show up in Glory's universe, right? Could there be another mystery that is non-murder? I don't know the answer to it. I think a murder is more compelling. I think it's so taboo. So the stakes are incredibly high. But I like the idea of thinking about a mystery that's not a murder. So
Yeah, I've read several that were not murders. It's not as common, and I think people have done it really well. But yeah, it's a lot easier to kind of throw in the dead body in a way, because for sure there are high stakes, when there's murder happening.
Absolutely. And I can sympathize with you, Danielle, because I write a series set in a small town and I'm up to book 18. And, how do you avoid that Cabot Cove syndrome where, people start to think that maybe Jessica Fletcher is actually this secretive serial killer who has, caused so many murders. I've done it by having historical, finding really old bones that are 30-year-old bones to look for, or, slightly different neighborhoods at least. So let's talk about your plans for the future. So Danielle, you said you have at least 3 books going, or a thought of 2 more.
No, well, I have another book, the second in the Glory B series, or the Glory Broussard series, coming out. The teaser chapter says this fall. It'll probably be more January is what we are looking at. And then after that, we'll see. I would love to write more.
And how about you, Mark? Do you have more between Luke and his potential boyfriend there?
I have written more. I have actually, I'm actually working on a very different project at the moment that is coming out next year. So if Luke and Jack have a future, we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, I've pivoted a little bit into a different genre. So
Okay, well, good luck to you. I kind of feel like you've made a good splash in this genre with getting a book that has gotten such good reviews. I would love to see you, continue in this genre. Jennifer, you have been in a couple of different series. Are we getting more with Yale and Celine?
Well, right now I'm focusing on the newest series that came out. So it's a magical fortune cookie series where the mom and daughter run an enchanted bakery with Chinese pastries. And so Ill-Fated Fortune, which is behind me, came out in February. And so I'm kind of focusing on that series right now.
Okay, and Patricia, are there more, you've set up a wonderful romance that is not a romance yet, but there's a definite attraction there between your 2 detectives. Do you see more? Do you see a series coming out of this?
Well, I certainly hope so. I have ideas. I am full of ideas. I know how the romance between them would develop, and how I would bring these 2 very opposite people together. I write romance for the rest of my career is romance writing. So getting these 2 together is important to me. I don't have a contract right now for more of them, but I would very much like a contract for more of them.
Yeah.
So.
And see, this is the advantage that I have in being a self-published author, is that I want to write another book in the series. I just write another book in the series. But then I'm not eligible for the Edgars either. So, but that's another story. How can we tell if there are questions from the audience? I've got the chat open, but I don't see any questions there. Here's Q&A, no open questions. So I encourage anyone in the audience to come up with questions if you have for any of our panelists. While we're waiting, Jennifer, I'm not sure if it was you, but someone recently wrote on Crime Reads about the Lunar New Year as a subject for a mystery. Was that you? If you don't remember it, then probably not.
I can't remember. Probably not. Not that recently.
Okay. Well, whoever that was inspired me to go think about a holiday themed mystery, because what that article said was, if you want to write a holiday themed mystery, then look at the characteristics of the holiday and see how they could work within a mystery genre. So in terms of the Lunar New Year, it was something red envelopes and something like the wrong envelope going to somebody. So there were some great ideas that spurred me to think about that. What do you guys think about, as readers or writers, about holiday themed cozies? We saw a lot of those this year. There are so many Christmas Village mysteries. What do you think? Do holidays work for you?
I love them. Love it. I also think a holiday cozy mystery is fun because that's a time when you might have more time to read, maybe not in the lead up to Christmas, but maybe after Christmas, you might have a little time. So it fits with the season. I'm dying to write a Christmas mystery, actually. And book 2 of Glory will have a lot of Mardi Gras content.
Yeah. Can't write Louisiana without Mardi Gras sometime. Patricia, do the Amish celebrate holidays? They don't seem like holiday people. I don't think they even celebrate birthdays, do they?
Oh, they do. They celebrate birthdays. They celebrate Christmas. They celebrate Easter. They just tend to do it in a much more low-key way. The gifts they give are small, inexpensive, and useful. So, and decorations, they wouldn't have a Christmas tree, but they might put out some greenery or some ribbon or something like that. So they keep it very very simple and very plain and very focused on the religious meaning behind the celebrations, instead of they wouldn't necessarily do a lot of Easter egg hunting, for example. So so they do, but it's a little more low key then. Yeah.
So we have a question about your writing process. Are you a plotter or a pantser? I'm going to start with Danielle because there was something about your writing that really struck me, which is that you're writing in the third person, jumping around from narrator to narrator, often in the same scene, which, in my education at least, was taught as head hopping and something that we should avoid. I thought you carried it off, but yeah. Was that something that got any feedback from your editors? Or
I mean, we're pretty much in Glory's, we're third person close. Right. And so throughout the book, and where that close is generally Glory. And there are some standalone scenes with Delphine. And so when Delphine is by herself, that's the daughter, we're in her point of view. But generally we're in a third person close, aligned with Glory.
And how were you a plotter or a pantser?
Total chaos.
For anybody who's listening who's not familiar with those terms, a plotter is somebody who sketches out the plot either in limited detail or sometimes great detail, or a pantser is somebody who writes by the seat of his or her pants.
I believe that most people are a hybrid, is what I think. I don't think that most people are purely one or the other. I could be wrong. Well, I'm curious to see what everybody else says. I tend to write a handful of chapters, maybe 4 or 5 chapters at a time. So I'll sit down and plot those chapters and write them. And then I kind of pull over to the rest stop thinking, okay, now where do I need to go? What are the directions? How do I get there? Then I'll outline maybe another half dozen chapters, sit down, write those, and then go back to it. So I'm not purely one or the other. I think for me, especially in the first draft, writing is a process of discovery. I learn a lot of things about this story that I don't know. I think I know, but then I sit down and I write it and I learn a lot more. So I like to have a flexible mindset so I can allow those discoveries to make their way into the plot.
Patricia, how about you? Plotter or pantser?
Plotter mostly, but I plot in pencil. I'm not opposed to once I'm writing, I'll have it all plotted out. And then once I start writing, if I decide, oh, I need to change that, then I will adjust my plot or something. But I'm very much a plotter because I tend to work on some pretty tight deadlines. So I need to know where I'm going and I need to know how far through the book I'm at, if I'm on deadline or not. So it takes a little bit of the magic out of it in that way. but it keeps me on schedule. So
Interesting approach. And Jennifer, how about you?
I think I'm a hybrid, like Danielle was saying. I like to have the overview done, but I'm also willing to change it up. And I also try to do it organically, scene by scene, so a little bit like a flashlighter in that sense, and just taking the path of where the characters are leading me.
That's a great term, flashlighter. I had a quote on my computer for the longest time. Writing a novel is like driving a car at night with your headlights on. You can only see a short way ahead, but you can make the whole trip that way. And since then, I've moved more towards a hybrid, I guess you would say, where I know what the plot points are and what I'm moving towards, and then let the rest develop organically as I go. Mark, what about you?
I'm a pantser. Yeah, and I discovered writing this book, rather revising this book, that doesn't really work well with a murder mystery, where you kind of need to know who did it, or at least what's happening. At some point, I figured that out pretty close to the end of writing it, so that was interesting. So that's okay. It has worked so far.
Yeah, yeah. And I think sometimes if you leave yourself room for that experimentation, when you go back and look at your early draft, you discover things that your subconscious put in that then you can use and just make more of. How about tying this into something very current? What would your sleuths have done about the eclipse? Would they have gone on a road trip? Would they stay inside with the shutters drawn? Any ideas?
I think Luke would force Jack to take the day off. Jack is the Mountie, of course, in my little excerpt. He would probably go up into the wilderness. He'd try and look at the eclipse without glasses on, and Jack would have to intervene before he blinded himself.
I think that's a great example of how we can use things to really illuminate character as well. So another question that's come up here, what advice would you give to your past selves when you were either writing or querying your books? Is there something that you wish you could go back and say, oh, do this, or don't stress so much about that?
I think the advice that I would have is that it's hard for everyone. You're not being singled out. It's really hard for everyone to get an agent, to get a book deal. You're going to get a lot of rejections. It's not personal. So just stick with it. You're not being, you are not being punished or singled out for a thing. You're not being made to walk a road that is harder than anybody else.
I think that's great advice. Anyone else?
I think to be patient, yes, that it might take a while. But and then in that waiting period, I would recommend finding community, whether it's I'm part of Sisters in Crime, so Sisters in Crime, or MWA, or Crime Writers of Color, or some group where people are creative minded and can lend you support and just be there and understand the ups and downs that is the writing life.
Well, and I think from listening to you guys this evening, one thing that I think all of you have said is to be true to the story that you want to tell, and to represent yourself in your books, represent your culture, try and be a window for readers into your world. Question here: as a cozy fan, I read for the sense of place as much as the love of character, familiar faces and locales. I sometimes want to hide in. I know for myself, I often jump back to an atlas. I want to see the place. Where in Louisiana is Lafayette? Or where is Petunia's town? I have been to Lancaster and I know a little bit about the Amish. So, and I've gone and Googled night markets. We have a night market at a little outdoor shopping center near me, and I keep saying, "Oh, I really want to go there because I've been exposed to that from your books." How do you keep? And so, I guess this question is really for Patricia, because you have been writing about the Amish for quite a while. How do you keep the scenes fresh as you write more and more books set in a particular locale?
Well, I suppose the characters are all a little different. So there's just the uniqueness of a different person in a familiar area. The other thing that I tend to do is I will look at different chores or different jobs they have to do that the rest of us don't do. And I'll research that. Recently, I was researching how you would clean out one of those big wooden cook stoves and how often do you have to clean them and what would the process be to clean them out. So things like that where they have to have a conversation, something has to come out, they have to discuss something, but I'm going to put in a really interesting chore they have to do that for the rest of us might be slightly horrifying. So that's one of the things that I'll do to freshen it up a little bit.
And Jennifer, are all of your books set in LA or the general LA area?
The last two series, my Sassy Cat Mysteries and the LA Night Market, yes. Right. And then this new series is actually set in Central California in a fictional town.
So how did you keep LA different and interesting? I mean, I know it's such a varied place. Did you concentrate in a particular? Yeah, I think the book that I read was set very much in a neighborhood.
Yes, so right. I'll do it by neighborhood or like region, or I mean, in the Night Market, the first book, Death by Bubble Tea, everything is really focused on that night market because that's where the body is found. So I can do it that way.
And then, so we still have 10 minutes left. I do want to point out from the chat, to join, and as I think Jennifer said, join MWA if there are aspiring authors in our audience. MWA has been certainly a very important part of my writing career, so we want to give them a big shout out. There are, of course, other organizations that writers can join as well. We'll have one more question, and then I want you guys to think about, is there something that you want to say in particular about your work that I haven't asked you about? But let's talk for a minute about research. So, Patricia, you just told us about the research you've done. Danielle, what kind of research did you have to do for, I hope you're not going to say that you're a hoarder.
Well, First and foremost, my family is from Lafayette. I spent pretty much every summer of my childhood going there. So I know Lafayette really well. It didn't require much research. All of the streets, nearly all of the restaurants are real locations. And when I was unsure about something, I just called my mom. So most of my research consisted of calling my mom.
And are you an attorney by trade, or did you have to
No.
do research for Delphine?
Not really, the things that I didn't know about, whether it's being a lawyer, this Delphine is a lawyer light in the book. She's not going to trial. She's
Right.
she's not deposing anyone. I feel like whatever we saw, you could a lot of episodes of Law and Order probably cover off on that.
She does use her legal training and her legal mind to help her mother.
That is
help
correct.
out with those kids, with how to get her mother out of this trouble.
Yes, maybe I did a little bit of research, but I certainly didn't go deep into the lawyerly stuff. More than anything, the details that were really important to me and the details that I wanted to get correct were the details of Lafayette, because I hoped, and it has happened, that the book would make its way to Lafayette, and I didn't want people to feel like I got it wrong, that I got the streets wrong, that I got the shops wrong. That would have been a big failure in my heart if people from Lafayette didn't feel like it was from Lafayette. And I've gotten a number of emails and Instagram messages saying, "Oh, I used to live in Lafayette and I just moved to Houston, and this book healed my heart." It felt good to be around, the people with those names and those places. I've eaten at those restaurants. That really did my heart warm. So I hope and I think that I got the Lafayette part right. That was important.
Good.
That was important.
And Mark, did you have to do any antiques research? I mean, there's some key clues in the book that relate to the antiques in the aunt's store.
Oh yes. I'm a former academic, so I research the crap out of everything. Um, I can't help it. And I mean, I spent a whole day researching Canadian probate law. I mean, for a throwaway line that doesn't matter. Um, so yes, I did a ton of research, and that's actually for me part of the fun. Is getting to say, well, I wonder about this. And I spent half an hour, actually, I spent more than that researching Mountie uniforms, which was very interesting, and I learned a lot. So,
Well, good. And so one last question for you all, and then tell us if there's something I haven't asked. Do you get much response from readers? And has there been any reader response? Danielle just answered this. Have there been any reader response that said that was particularly wonderful to you or surprising to you, etc.? And I guess, I doubt that the Amish are reading, Patricia, your books, but there may be English who know the Amish. Have you heard from any of them who've said, "Oh, you've really
yeah.
captured this world"?
Yeah, I've actually gotten some real compliments from some readers who live around Amish country and have Amish friends, who said that I really captured the way the Amish think really well, and the way they think about outsiders versus insiders and that sort of thing. So that really meant a lot to me to hear that. I hear from readers a lot because I will hands down always reply. If readers send me a message, because I'm always honored when someone spends their money on my book. So I will always respond. So I hear from a lot of readers, and I'm just honored to hear from just whatever they want to chat about, or they enjoyed a book, and I'm just tickled to hear from them.
I get a lot of pictures of people's dogs because I'm writing about dogs. Jennifer, how about, because I think sometimes people who are not Asian tend to lump Asian people together. But I thought you did a really good job of separating out different cultures and different ethnicities. Do you get response to that in your books, or do you just get general response from readers who say, "I enjoyed learning about this culture," or that you've represented my culture correctly?
More I think of the latter, like people saying thank you for the representation and, being able to be in the pages on a book. I've also had readers who are like, oh, I never knew about this, or I've, never tried bubble tea or something like that. And then I have readers who are just like, thank you, that even though, say, so Celine in the book is from Hong Kong, the character resonated with one reader who said, I really appreciated that because Celine doesn't have the best relationship with her family. And so that was kind of a point that was resonating with this reader and really helped her kind of process through some of those emotions, and she should have felt reflected in that she could find community just like Celine has found community with Yale.
That's great. Is there anything that I have not asked you, or some final statement that you'd like to make? My computer says it's 8:57, and I think that we're going to shut down at 9. So any final thoughts?
I just want to say thank you to those of you who have read the book. Like Patricia, I respond to every email that I get, every DM, if it's nice, and that I get, because I'm just so honored that people would pay money. Hardcovers are expensive. And of course, reading is an activity that requires your complete and total attention. You're shutting out the rest of the world. And if someone's doing that for my book, I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, kudos to the
I
readers.
think it's
I
a
just
real
want to thank.
tribute. Oops, I just wanted to say it's a real tribute that this is Danielle, this is your first book, and Mark, your first. And that you did such a great job that you made it into the finalists there. But now, Jennifer?
Oh, no, I just wanted to thank MWA and then Neil, you for moderating as well tonight.
Yes, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
It's so, when you read a book and you love a book, you want to talk to people about it. But for a whole year, the only people I could talk to about the books I was reading were my fellow judges, because we weren't supposed to say anything out in public. So it's been a delight to see you all here tonight. And thank you for taking time out of your schedules to come and share with all of us with MWA. And I wish you the greatest success in your future writing careers.
Thank you very much, Neil. And to my fellow nominees, I hope I'll see some of you on May 1st. That would be